Hi, welcome to Planetary Calendar's Astrology Portraits. I'm Lahni DeAmicis, one of the Planetary Calendar astrologers. And this week we're going to look at an ensemble. We're looking at the cast and also at the overall show for something called Coastal Elites. And this is fascinating because it was produced during the COVID quarantine. So everyone had to produce it in quite a different way, because normally these things are teams. Big groups of people come together. There's, the director and the technical director and the cast and the script girl and all these different people doing things. But in this case, each one of the actors had to work by themselves with a very small crew and not even someone watching the script. So when they said, "What's my line?" they could say, "Oh, your line is this." Cue them. So what they did instead was everyone had teleprompters right there on the camera, which is very unusual for an actor. An actor is expected to know their lines, and then they'll change lines as they go along. So they really stuck with what the person was writing. And this is very much a show of its time. And the reason I say that is if you look at the current transits, the Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto conjunction in Capricorn, which astrologers have been dreading for a bunch of years, which is happening at the time when this show was produced. And we actually underestimated how bad it was going to be because it was going to be the global pandemic as well as an economic collapse, as well as all the other stuff that came along with it. It's very much an expression of that because the writer of this, Paul Rudnick, originally wrote this for the theater in New York City. So it was very much a bunch of New Yorkers who were trapped in their apartments getting together to talk about how they felt about it. Well, he is born with the sun in Capricorn. So this is very much his words. And he was born right outside of New York, New Jersey. What's interesting is the only major planet he has in Capricorn is the sun, though I think he might have Capricorn rising as well by the face structure. And his co-producer on this is a fellow named Jay Roach, they were born in the same year. And when you look at them, they look so similar. Now, he was born in Gemini, but he looks so Capricornian. I think he probably has Capricorn rising, very high cheekbones, angular face. So I think he has Capricorn rising. So I think it really resonated for the two of them. Now, they had to put together actors. And what's interesting is who they pick. They picked 5 people. 2 were born in Capricorn. 2 were born in Sagittarius. Why Sagittarius? Because Paul Rudnick has 3 planets in Sagittarius, including his Mercury, his writing style, right? His Saturn, his connection to the world, and his Mars in Sagittarius. So very, very strong positions. What's very funny about this is that you realize that with this big conjunction, the energy of Jupiter, the expansive, fun-loving Jupiter, is completely chained to hardworking introvert Saturn. Yuck. And Pluto's just thrown in there. The power of the tiny is thrown in there just to keep it entertaining. So all this stuff is bound up in there. So all of that Sagittarian energy is chained to Saturn. So having Sagittarians there, of course, they're feeling their energy chained to this very hard compressive energy of Saturn. Okay. So who are the 4 actors? And it's interesting because the birth dates go from 1945 to 1996, 51 years. The first character is a woman named Miriam Nessler, played by Bette Midler, born in Honolulu. And she is in a police station about the fact that she's had a run-in with a man wearing a MAGA hat that did not go well. It goes on to the next person. The next person is Daniel Levy. Now, he's the Leo. He's the outlier. And he's a gay actor who's going for an interview for a role as a gay superhero. And he's having a lot of angst about parading himself as a gay for this role. And then he goes into this whole thing about Mike Pence and Pence's feelings about gays and Pence's wife. And what's funny is that I don't think Paul Rudnick picked him. I think that Jay Roche picked him. And the reason is that all the other characters' charts relate very strongly to Paul, the writer. But Jay's chart relates to Dan Levy. And the reason is that Dan Levy has his Mars in Cancer, as does Paul Roche, but Paul Roche has Venus in Cancer, and people who have Venus in the sign of someone else's Mars find that person very attractive, whether it's male or female. They find that energy very attractive, and there's a number of connections in there. And the Geminis usually like the Leos anyway, because Gemini is Mercury, Leo is the Sun, Mercury is the closest to the Sun. Also, Dan Levy has Mercury and Venus in Virgo. Well, that's the other Mercury-ruled sign. So the Geminis and the Virgos, they always like working in the same field. So I think that that Dan Levy was Jay Roche's contribution. And it was his way of saying, hey, I'm the producer. Let's lighten this up a little bit. And he knew that Dan Levy would bring a nice energy to it. And he was the only male actor. All the other are women. Now, the next one is Issa Rae, who I love. I think she's just great. And she plays Callie Jofferson, and she's a very wealthy young woman who's managing the foundation for her father. Her father owns the largest African-American mortgage company in the world, and she went to the same boarding school as Ivanka. So it talks about her experience of going to the White House, where they're the only people of color there, and Ivanka taking her aside and talking to her about why do people hate me? Which, of course, Issa Rae has lots to say about, or Callie has lots to say about. So it's a fantastic rendition, but she's another Capricorn. Once again, this is very much Paul Rudnick's voice speaking through here. After that is Sarah Paulson. Now, Sarah Paulson is another Sagittarian, like Bette Midler, but she has her Venus in Capricorn. Now this is a little different from Bette Midler. Bette Midler has the Moon in Scorpio and Aries rising. She's very forceful. She's born with the Sun conjunct the star Antares, the warlike star. She's 5'1" tall, and she seems 6'4" because she has so much energy, has so much passion for what she's doing. Where Sarah Paulson has the Sun, Mercury, the North Node, Neptune, and Mars in Sagittarius, and then this Venus in Capricorn, which makes her seem a little more reserved, and the Moon in Aquarius, and then Virgo rising. So it's a much more subdued energy. There's a lot of energy inside, but it's subdued at the surface. Mars and Mercury in Sagittarius, like Paul Rudnick. And once again, it's very easy for him to speak through her. And she is a meditation teacher named Carissa Montgomery, who goes home to see her family at the beginning of the pandemic, who are all wearing MAGA hats. It doesn't turn out well. She's back on a flight to Vermont, where she lives, where she's been doing daily meditations online, streaming them to help people, and tells the story of her father, who will not vote for that man because of John McCain. And it's very powerful. It's very powerful. And yet, the most powerful of all of them, I think, was the youngest, Caitlin Dever, who plays Sharon Taros, a young nurse from Wyoming who, along with her friend, has volunteered to come to New York City to help with the pandemic. And this lovely young woman, this hardworking nurse, she has Mars in Virgo. She's another Capricorn, born at the first degree of Capricorn, with a bunch of planets in Capricorn, but with a Mars in Virgo, so she's perfect for playing a nurse because it's a subdued energy. And she's telling the story of just coming off a 12-hour shift. A 12-hour shift working with people walking in her particular experience, and it's called President Miriam. It's a woman that she met, an older Jewish woman from New York who she meets, who just blows her away. It's a beautiful story. And what's interesting is when you're looking at this, you're seeing how she's filming it. She's sitting in a medical office with a camera right in front of her with a teleprompter around that. So she's practically reading her lines because it's just them and a camera. The crew is outside on the porch. But it's really amazing. Like I said, this is such a true representation of these two Capricorns, these two Sagittarians, of Paul Rudnick's voice, which you almost never get to hear the writer's voice coming through that clearly, because in most movies, it gets changed around. And it's a representation of that big trilogy of planets, Pluto, Jupiter, and Saturn, that so crushed the energy out of so many people on this planet during this conjunction. Come see us on Fridays for your forecast with Planetary Calendar, and come see us on Tuesdays for our portraits. And come visit us at spaceandtime.com or planetarycalendar.com, and be well.